All right, let's get started. Welcome to the Porter Community Meeting for June 16th, 2022. I'm Carolyn Van Slyke. Just a quick reminder that this meeting is recorded and it will be posted on YouTube. I think we have some new people. Would anyone else like to introduce themselves and say hi?
I could go.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Tanmay. I work at Adobe. I'm from India. Only recently started contributing. So this is my first meeting. I want to see what it's all about. I'm still new to Porter. I'm trying to understand all the things it can do. It seems very exciting. Although I'm an SRE by designation, I do a lot more stuff. So this is all in my wheelhouse. That's why I found this project interesting. And so far it's been great. I like the way the project is being run and all the support that the new contributors get. So looking forward to making more contributions.
That's great. Thanks for joining and thanks for the PRs already.
No problem.
Just a reminder, if you haven't signed up, we are giving away hoodies for anyone who's contributed. Just showing up means you qualify. So here's a link with all the info. We're probably gonna be wrapping this up this week and then sending them out really soon. Today, what I was hoping to talk about, if there's other things we need to chat about, just add them to the bottom of the agenda. Anyone can edit this page. I linked to it in chat, but it's just porter.sh dev-meeting. I was hoping to go over what our V1 release is going to look like and what our time frame is. I'm not committing to like any particular date, but we're shooting for this summer to get a final V1 out the door. We have a milestone here. It's not 100% a commitment. These are things that we think if we can get them in for 1.0, that would be best. But we're still not above realizing this can be done in a minor patch in V1 and then moving it. So if you want to see what's here, if you want to help with it, that'd be great. Some of these, we have people working on them. Oops. And let's real quick. Make sure no one grabs ones that are already taken. But we're chipping away at it. We're getting good. We're down to 27, which is great. A lot of these do actually have a little bit of work already done on them. We're just like the verbosity flag and a couple other ones. We're just trying to figure out, do we have the right design and everything before we lock it in for V1 and then we can't change it. So what I'd like to go over is our release stages for alpha beta release candidate and just what commitments are we making about each one and what you can expect to work and what type of changes you would have to make when you upgrade to each one of these. Right now we're in alpha, and what that mainly means is that our database schema isn't guaranteed to not change between releases in alpha. Not just the database schema, actually, it could be the bundle schema or parameter set schema, things like that. So we're not, supporting any migrations right now during alpha, but I've written a migration to get us to beta, and we're super close. I keep saying our last alpha, and I should stop saying that, but I am cutting one more alpha release today because we've had enough changes go in. For example, we fixed a long-standing gap with self-signed certificates with say you're using a remote Docker endpoint. We now support like self-signed TLS certs, things like that. I just want to get them out as part of the alpha so that when we release beta 1, which should be very soon, we're not also shipping 30 other things in it at the same time, so we can kind of isolate some of the more larger changes. If at any time you have questions or comments about any of this, please feel free to stop me or raise your hand. Just, type something in chat. I wanted to walk through what the data migration is going to look like. because this is actually implemented. I'm just holding off and making sure that we've got this completely tested and vetted properly before going to beta. The idea is that right now, if you're using V0, okay, and V038 is the stable release, it's been out for a year, you have a Porter home directory. Usually that's in your home directory and it's called .porter. And inside that directory is a bunch of things. One, Porter itself is installed in there. Your plugins are there and your mixins are there. In addition, if you're not using external storage, records of what you've installed, what bundles you've installed, what versions it's on, what parameters you pass, what outputs it generated, a whole bunch of data is in that Porter home directory. So for the migration from V0 to V1, you're going to create a new Porter home directory. So for example, what I've done when I've been testing this is I just move the old one somewhere else. And then my new one going forward will kind of be the traditional default location of the .porter directory in my home. And what Porter will do is you can run this command, storage migrate, tell it where your old home directory is. And what it'll do is it'll go through all the data that's in your old Porter home directory using the old plugins, which are still capable of reading it. We've made big breaking changes to the plugins. So new plugins cannot read old data. So it's really important that your old Porter home still has old Porter in it and your old plugins. And it will read out all the data and then copy it without changing your original directory. It will copy it into your new Porter home, we use databases now, so it'll actually go into a database somewhere. As soon as this comes out, we really need people helping to test this. So if you have old data, like please run this command somewhere so that we know if there's a problem with it. I've run it on my stuff, but we definitely I don't feel great with just Carolyn's machine. I'm not sure about anybody else, but that's the data migration plan. Are there any questions about that before I move forward? Great. Sounds like a wonderful plan. I'm glad you all agree. So the idea is that starting with the first beta release all the way through our final 1.0 release, you can migrate your data from V0 to this new format, and then we'll support that data all the way up through to the release. We don't plan on changing anything about the database schema or anything like that, but I think it's going to happen. If there's anything that does happen, that migrate command will be there, and we can always use that then to make sure that whatever data you're trying and you're doing a migration off of V0 onto V1 will support you. When you do upgrade from V0 to the beta, your existing bundles that you've published out there, maybe parameter set files that you're not saving in Porter's database, you may be saving locally in a file, and using it during CI credential sets as well, will need minor changes to work with the beta. The biggest changes, we now put a schema version on all of these. And for some of you, that's probably the only change you're gonna have to make, to be honest, but we'll have a doc that just walks you through, like, hey, add this field, move this field here. For the most part, it's pretty straightforward. The biggest changes are if you're using dependencies, which has kind of been a prototype we've had all along and we're going to be replacing soon. But if you are using dependencies right now, that's kind of the one bundle change that is most impactful for everyone. So that's the other call. Like, I need help testing the migration of your data, but I also need help testing if you have existing bundles, how is that working on V1? So this is the time to try that and give feedback, because we can still change things in beta. If you're hoping just wait until we're done and it's V1, it's going to be really hard to change anything if there's a disconnect between what we expected when we were developing it and what you're doing. So now is the time to try it out. We should have that beta. I don't know. I'm hoping within the next 2 weeks, we'll have that beta 1 release. The last thing about the beta I want to point out is we're not done with breaking changes. So I wanted to call out what those are, and you can use this link to see them. We just have a couple more. We've been slowly moving. I'm gonna go over each one of these so people understand like how they're gonna be impacted by this during the beta. Right now we have 2 flags: debug plugins, and that's not working very well for us. And we've been slowly over the past couple months re-instrumenting all of our code. And what we're going to be doing is introducing just a single flag, verbosity, and you can control info, error, warn, things like that, debug, instead of having to control these 2 flags. In addition, the Porter build command has a 3rd flag, verbose. That's going to go away too. And again, it'll all just kind of consolidate down into that new flag, which will probably be called verbosity or log love or something like that. We haven't exactly settled on it, which is why the change hasn't gone in yet. So that will definitely be breaking change if you've automated and scripted Porter. The other one is this one. Our flags and some of our commands are a little bit inconsistent. And so what we're going to be doing is tweaking some of them so that, for example, the log flag for credential set is credential set, because right now it's parameter set and cred. So we're going to be fixing little things like that. Or maybe tweaking where some of our commands are. We had a whole bunch of commands shoved under bundle. Now we have the concept of an installation. We're going to create additional commands here. So if you were I don't think anyone's doing this, to be honest. We have aliases for all these commands, so you can just run Porter install, Porter upgrade, etc. But if you are using the long form of Porter bundle install, that'll be changing. I don't expect that to impact too many people. It's really just that cred set flag that is gonna be the most impactful. This isn't quite a breaking change so much as you're going to have to change what you're doing, but you should be aware that it's going to change the default behavior of Porter. We're going to start allowing outputs from a mixin, like a step output, to be flagged as not sensitive. By default, everything a mixin generates, all of its outputs are considered sensitive, and we use those asterisks or stars in our logs, and we blank it all out. We're now going to have a sensitive flag on it, and sensitive is going to default to false. And you're going to have to then opt in and say, this is a sensitive output. So it won't like immediately break bundles, but it'll be a different behavior. So if you were relying on everything being asterisked out, you should rebuild the bundle and start flagging things as sensitive. The other 2, to be honest, we still haven't figured out what the final behavior is. But let's just go through them. When you're referencing an image in your bundle, there's a bunch of different information you can provide. What's the type of image? You can assign labels, a whole bunch of other things. But the most important thing that everyone's relying on is the tag. So if my bundle uses a Helm chart and that Helm chart uses Nginx, what people do is, you add that to the reference images section. And right now you have to specify a full digest for it, which is awkward. We'd really like to get it where you can put a tag in there. And when you do Porter build, we'll lock in that tag. So it's, again, a behavior change, but we just wanted to call that out. That's coming down the pipeline. And then also we're going to be tweaking how you can consume parameters that are JSON documents, essentially. Right now, if you try to define a parameter that accepts JSON, like, for example, this, Porter just gives you the entire blob. You can ask for the parameter and we'll give you that full document, curly braces and all. But what we'd really like to be able to do is this. We can say we want the config, and then we can say which particular field inside that document we want as well. This is considered a breaking change just because of how we hand off the data. There may be a way we can do this without a breaking change, and we could potentially bump this to a minor release. So if you have feels on this one, please leave a comment. But I think this will be an improvement for accessing more fine-grained field data in the parameters that we're passing. So I just want to call out, these are things that you may be impacted by in beta. But we're trying really hard to, if we can make any of these not breaking changes, that's what we'll be doing. I'm going to stop for a second. Does anyone have any questions, concerns? Okay, I was expecting pitchforks. This is good. So that's the beta. And we do, as part of the beta, it's not just those breaking changes. You saw the milestone. We have a bit more. I want to call out one more change. This won't be a breaking change, but it's be a change that I think a lot of people will want to opt into. We're going to support better template delimiters. So right now, the template delimiter is a double curly brace. We're going to offer the option to do, let's see if I can just scroll and find you an example quick, a $sign curly brace. Curly braces have special meaning in YAML, and that's why in a lot of places, whenever you're using it, you have to quote it. And that can limit the data types you're able to express in your bundle. So allowing people to use $sign curly brace is just much more YAML friendly, and it allows you to pass a parameter as a Boolean or pass it as a number and actually have it come through as a number to the mixin, as opposed to being interpreted as a string because you were forced to quote the curly braces. So that'll be coming in pretty soon too. So let's talk about the release candidate. When we've gone through that backlog and identified what has to go into V1, obviously anything we can push into a minor that isn't hugely impactful, we'll do that. And at some point we're going to be done with our backlog and we think we've got something that's shippable. We will tag that as a release candidate. And that's when we really need people's help to test it, make sure that there aren't any show-stopping bugs that would make us not want that to be the final release. Because the idea is we're going to put it out there. We're going to give people a reasonable amount of time to test. And if we don't hear anyone screaming, that will become 1.0. If we find things, we'll cut another RC and move up to RC 1, 2, 3, etc. But that is the plan for how the release candidate will work. If you let us know if you have plans for beta testing or doing RC testing, so that we can coordinate with you and make sure that we've gotten your thumbs up before we move to the next stage of this process. As an open source project, if you don't let us know that you're trying things, we just kind of got to go by, do we get bugs or not? And if you haven't gotten around to something, but you really would like to check it before we cut a release, let us know. So when we move to 1.0, we're going to have, again, a long-term stable branch for V0 38. But to be honest, we don't have the people to support it, and it is well over a year old. So just know that you need to move it off it as quickly as possible once 1.0 is out. A lot of new features and security improvements are in the V1 release that are not in V0. V0 has been getting critical necessary patches, and that'll continue for probably like 3 months after the release. And then we'll be done, and you will either need to maintain it yourself, or ideally move to V1. In general, what we would consider patching are high severity vulnerabilities that actually impact Porter. Oftentimes like a change in a dependency, maybe a dev dependency, things like that. We're not going to rebuild for those. It's only if they impact the actual compiled binary, or if there's vulnerabilities in Go itself, we'll rebuild. But the bar is going to be really high for cutting new releases of V038. Are there any questions or concerns about that timeline? Stephen, Jeremy, will that work for you? Are you planning on moving to V1 pretty quickly?
We have nothing in production right now on V0. So I actually just moved all of our stuff that we're getting ready to launch onto V1 as part of our POC. So we're not even going to mess with trying to productionize anything in V0.
That's great.
So same here. We actually have nothing in V0.
Okay.
To move. So in fact, I'm afraid we won't even be testing that function, the upgrade, the storage upgrade functionality, because we just don't have anything.
Yeah.
That's fine. Internally,
yeah, neither will we.
Yeah, internally, Microsoft is using it in prod right now, so we'll have them test it. But I just want to make sure if anyone else is using it that they try it before we blow past it. Want to make sure people are testing things in a timely fashion. That's great. You're not using it in prod. That makes me feel better. And then with V1, I just want to discuss real quick what the strategy is for how we're going to develop going forward. We want to limit breaking changes that would require bumping the major, anything that would affect compatibility between like 1.1 and 1.2, bundles built with 1.1, bundles built with an older one, a new version of Porter, that kind of thing. We want to, as much as possible, be like, if the major versions line up, it'll work. That's the goal. Dependencies is the next huge feature. It's in development right now. We're planning to release that as a minor update to V1. And you'll be able to opt into it and then update your bundle to use the new method of specifying dependencies. But we're not planning on that being a V2 of Porter. So you should be able to jump on it, try it out, and potentially use old wave dependencies and new wave dependencies in different bundles, and it'll all work with the same version of Porter. The database schema or any of our document schemas, like if you're saving parameter sets, installations, etc., to a file within the V1 release, that shouldn't change at all. You should always just be able to use those and not need to make any changes to that. Going forward with any other new features similar to dependencies, we're going to be feature flagging things and kind of doing side-by-side development whenever possible, so that if it's technically possible to release as a minor without bumping the version and impacting compatibility, that's what we're going to do. I can't guarantee we'll be capable of doing that for some of the larger features that are planned, but we're going to try really hard, and that's my goal, is everything should be able to be flagged and done in V1. Our roadmap is a little stale at this point. If you go to porter.sh roadmap, you can kind of see what we're thinking, what we're working on. Things like security is going to become huge after the V1 release. We will go through this together and kind of update it, and again, think about a year out and see what we're going to be trying to tackle. And we'll be doing that post the 1.0 meeting. We'll get that roadmap refreshed and get more realistic timelines on when we're hoping to release things like advanced dependencies, completely revamping bundle security around like isolating mixins, things like that. Some of our big peps that we've been sitting on, essentially, we'll get those slotted in to the roadmap after the 1.0 release. Are there any questions about how we're going to make changes to 1.0 going forward once we've released? Y'all are being too nice here. Okay, great. Well, that's all I had. Steve, it looks like you've added something here. You want to explain what
Yeah,
you'd like to talk about?
I wanted to talk about how we can do the outputs and natively get it as a part of the operator.
Yeah.
I haven't been working on this. I've been working on something else, and Brian, unfortunately, he couldn't make it today. He's out, but he's been having some issues with just, I guess, coming up with a solution that just doesn't feel awful.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about some of the different things he's tried and see like if we can come up with a better solution for it. So currently the way he's trying to implement it is from inside the installation controller, once the agent action has finished running, and he implemented something into the agent image that actually runs the porter command on the agent. He added in the ability to create a list of commands, right? So it'll run one command right after the other. So it'll do like porter install blah and porter output show, and we'll actually can have the outputs as part of standard out in the pod logs. The problem is now we need to ingest pod logs into the controller runtime environment. And that's where things are kind of a little bit dicey, because there's not really a way to get like a native object from an agent action into Kubernetes. So essentially we're taking and inside the installation controller reading in pod logs, and then going to have to filter it based off of a separator, and then extract the outputs from that. And it just doesn't feel like the right way to go about that. Another option we talked about was having the agent image itself throw down maybe an installation output CRD, and inside the agent, it actually reads and parses the outputs, does like the outputs listed to a JSON to a file, and it ingests the file and then creates a CRD, but that becomes pretty brittle at that point.
Let's talk about a different way to go about this. Have you tried, because you've got the multiple commands, which I do feel is the right way to roll. So right now, if you call show, it prints the standard out. If you do -O,
yes, yep.
Have you been tried? If you try, I forget what the porter is even. Is it called porter shared? I think something like that. This is going to get stored on the volume. Do we have a timing problem, or how'd that work for you?
I think he gave that a shot, and there was a timing problem, but I wasn't sure that he was actually able to even read that into the controller, because you have to have a pod mounted in order to read the volume that's associated with it. So I think what he was doing in that instance was like you could keep, if you keep the agent action pod around, then you can actually go grab that file from the controller. But as soon as the pod goes away, that volume mount goes away, and then you can't actually read volume mounts into the controller runtime directly. So we were talking about like maybe setting up a signal into the agent where it's like, okay, we're going to get the outputs, drop it into a file, and then wait until we get a signal from our controller saying, I've consumed those outputs, and then the pod can terminate.
I mean, my gut feels like you've tried a whole bunch of things, and I'm going to agree that they all sound like really bad hacks.
They all sound terrible because
Yeah,
basically we're
yeah.
at the point now, it's like, do we put in a really bad hack and know that once we have a gRPC API, all of
Yeah.
this really goes away, right? Because the controller should be able to just hit the API for anything outside of, running a specific porter command.
Yeah. What if,
So
I mean, I
go
don't know
ahead.
what your timelines are, but maybe we should just be talking about, we have a gRPC service and the very first thing it supports when we ship it is grabbing an output.
That was our last
Yeah.
discussion where we
Okay.
left off on Tuesday
Yeah.
about that. The issue with that is this is not hugely pressing for us because we actually have a workaround, because what we're doing is we have Argo workflows running,
Yeah.
and that's the one that actually lays down the porter installation CRD, and then we just have something that waits for the installation to succeed, and then we can do a this output parsing on our own. So we're doing this like with kubectl and getting pod logs, and then we have our own little utility that parses that. But it's all inside the realm of Argo workflows. So we're not blocked by not being able to get outputs natively from the operator, but it just doesn't seem like adding them into the operator specifically feels like a good way to do it, at least not with how the operator is currently designed. Like if we did a massive rehaul on the operator, it might become a little bit more native, but it just doesn't feel worth it.
Yeah. No. I just want the gRPC service, I think, based on what you said. Like none of that is something that I think we should put out there. The need isn't there, when we have a much better solution.
Any solution we come up with would be an ugly workaround until we actually have a more native API into Porter.
Yeah. Okay. Why don't I'll update that issue with some of like what you've looked into. And then we'll just be like, we're not going to do the hack. And what we need is to start designing how we want that gRPC service to get into the operator, how it should be accessed by, like, what's the patterns, just like we have patterns around talking to Porter through the agent action. What's the pattern for the operator interacting with this gRPC service, or for someone else through CRDs to grab data through that service?
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the right way. I don't know if anyone else is currently even really using the operator much, or if they're using outputs and doing it in a different way.
You're the only one I know using outputs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Cool.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, thank you for looking into this. I was hopeful that something like this with the, sending the outputs with file would work, but I mean, I do see the problem, it's just ugly. I don't think any of us wants that.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about ways to do this also with like multiple containers in the pod.
Yeah.
But especially now with the non-root stuff, it makes it, anything we come up with is just going to be kind of a workaround.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't think the gRPC service is that scary that we should be doing work to avoid that work, Yeah.
I mean, that feels pretty native into Porter itself, right? There'll be a Porter CLI and a Porter serve.
Yep.
And that just it feels like a real good companion.
Okay. If anyone is interested in thinking about the gRPC service, just to set expectations, like that would absolutely need a design doc proposal that kind of outlines like, what are we going to expose? How are people going to interact with it? As Yingrong knows, when we implemented gRPC protocol for plugins, there were a lot of surprises. So I think we're going to be really, really careful and do a bit of research on how to expose the service. Sorry. In a way that we're not having to tweak it 2 months later after putting it out. But I would welcome anyone's help in designing that. Because at least for me and, like what we could take on, that would have to be pretty far down the roadmap. Just considering all the other things we have on our plates at the moment. But things go faster if anyone's interested in working on them now.
We're a lot more interested in dependencies than we are in outputs, because like we have a way to work around that.
And so I have been working on dependencies when I have gotten time, and I've been slowly chipping away at like, we need these changes, and I'm getting them in now actually. Because some of them were breaking, just getting them ahead of the V1, and otherwise just getting refactorings and other things that we need into Porter so that we can kind of start breaking this down into tasks. So next meeting, we'll be talking about dependencies. I can go over what I've done and coming up with a strategy for how people can pick up tasks and kind of help chip away at getting this delivered, because I've just been doing it in my free time, actually, just because I think it's fun.
I know from our use case, like the number one thing, and hopefully it's low-hanging fruit that we're looking for, is the ability to pass an output of a dependency into the input of either another dependency or into the input of the installation itself.
Yeah.
Like that right there, that would be the thing that would just take us to the next level with this stuff.
That's what I'm working on right now with it. Actually.
Yeah, I was creeping on your
my branch
your fork.
there.
Yeah, on your branch on that. So
yeah, it's that thing's ugly. It's just purely trying out different things. None of it's usable, but yeah, I'll take what I have so far and just make it so that other people can start grabbing this work and working on it. So we can collaborate on it together. But yeah. I mean, the goal with dependencies, and I don't want to derail us too far, but we're at the end of the meeting, is that we're essentially going to replace how Porter runs bundles so that they're all run in a very standard way, so that if you're running one bundle or you're running a workflow, like a set of dependencies, that it's all handled the same way and supports grabbing data from other places and things like that. And that's going to be baked into it then, is passing outputs from something previous into the current run of a bundle. Cool. Well, that's it, folks. Thanks for joining today. As always, if you have something you want to talk about, just throw it on the agenda or ping me in Slack, something like that. Really looking forward to this release. I think it's gonna be good.
I'm gonna get a PR for that schema change in today. I just ran into some issues yesterday, and then my computer started crashing at the end of the day. So I have it done, but I can't do much when my computer crashes. So
yesterday was rough.
Yeah, this was a long day.
Okay, no, it sounds great. Thanks, everyone. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.